Folks, I gotta warn you guys, graphic content, all right? You're gonna see some losers here. Be careful. Protesters seen with Nazi flags and Ron DeSantis flags, but I repeat myself, cough, outside Disney World entrance. I want to see videos of the Nazis. I don't want to see your little newsreel. There we go, a slow drive-by. Classic stuff. They're such clowns. There's actually lots of video footage out there, obviously. They were protesting. Of course, people took video. These brave, noble men have brought upon themselves the greatest punishment and suffering, the greatest sacrifice that a American Nazi can do, which is do anything publicly and then be denounced as feds and FBI agents by everyone who agrees with them. This is the greatest sacrifice that you can make, going outside as a Nazi and therefore attracting the condemnation of everyone who agrees with you. The people here aren't feds, they're not ops, Nazis just like Ron DeSantis. Obviously, there's very little ideological difference between what the Nazis believed and what Ron DeSantis's underlying ideological motivations are. It's really just a matter of extent, how far they can get away with it, and a rhetorical shift in focus from Jews to trans people as the, degenerate force that's eroding Western civilization. It's not surprising, we all know this, so why am I talking about it? Well, first and foremost, okay, I gotta say, it's a little bit of a brand risk to have Nazis right outside of the Disney World entrance, you know? Of all the places you could have Nazis protest, they certainly chose an effective place for getting attention. I don't think Disney's going to appreciate this very much. I don't think it's a great look for Ron DeSantis to have his highly publicized battle with Disney, see these contenders enter the race, obviously siding with him. One of the biggest problems the right has always had is that politically, they are engaged in an operation to make schizo lunatics of their supporting base. They will laugh and cheer when people shoot up the Q Club in Colorado. They will applaud open violence and calls to violence against members of minority communities. And then they act shocked when all of these federal agents do false flags, making their community look bad and openly associating their ideology with Nazism. This is why they're so insistent on immediately denouncing. Do you remember when the that Hispanic white supremacist shot up that Texas mall and he had the swastika tattoo, and everyone on the right's response to it was, "This swastika man is an attempt to make us look bad," to which you look at them, cock an eyebrow, and you're like, really? Like, you're not even going to pretend to denounce the Nazism? Like, not a single one of you in the thousands of prominent Republican politicians and pundits are going to do this whole thing about how the evil of Nazism and white supremacy has caused more harm or something? Not one of you? Really? You're all going to immediately do the same thing that Nazis on Stormfront have been doing for years and years, which is to scream, "Fed! Fed! Fed!" anytime one of them goes outside, right? They're very overt about it. And the reason for this is because the Republican Party has correctly identified the fact that open denunciations of Nazi ideology are now going to alienate a significant portion of their base. I know that sounds like an exaggeration, but it's genuinely not. Seriously, go on Twitter right now and take a look under the replies to any number of far-right pundits and politicians. If a Republican in this environment were to say Nazis are bad, that would actually be a controversial statement for their base. And they know that, and they're aware of the fact that controversy itself would make them look bad, so they stay away from it. Stuff like this puts them in a really awkward position, because obviously DeSantis can't come out and endorse this. You know, they're not that far gone. The majority of Republican voters would not contend with that. But he can't really openly denounce it in the way that he might have been able to a decade ago, the way that, say, George W. Bush or John McCain would have denounced them, because, you know, that would cause a fracture in his base. So instead, he has to do this awkward, don't engage thing. And I ask you guys, am I wrong? Has DeSantis said anything? He will call them woke. Maybe. I'm sincerely asking. So nobody seems to be aware of him publicly commenting. Maybe he will. If he does comment, I doubt he'll say very much. I bet it'll be pretty perfunctory because it's an awkward situation. See, this is the fundamental problem with far-right advocacy. And it fits back into what I've said before about overextending, about overcommitting. The main problem is that the goal of the Republican Party is to groom their followers into becoming optics nightmares. You understand? They want their voters to be a certain way. They want to inspire stochastic terrorism. They want to inspire fear. But when you do stuff like that, you produce Nazis, you produce mass shooters, you produce all sorts of stuff that we keep seeing from the far right, and that's pretty difficult to contend with from an optics perspective. This is one of the reasons why I think that the right is overextending themselves. They're overplaying their hand. If we go back to a little-known example from history, Weimar Germany, the rise of the Nazi Party was full of dishonesty from Hitler and from the Nazis. They lied all the time. They downplayed, in some cases, their racism, their anti-Semitism, their militarism. They, they spoke of, like, German national unity. They talked about, like, workers' rights. They were lying, of course. We know how bad they ended up being, and they were aware of the fact that they would not actually hold to these values. But it should be noted that the worst iterations of what they were, what the Nazis represented, was something that they could hold to. It was something they were willing to defend. When the Night of Broken Glass happened, when essentially the Nazi officials both participated in and enabled mass riots from Germans to beat up Jewish people, to destroy their businesses, to steal from them. This was so rooted in the practice and ideology of the Nazi Party at the time that they didn't really have to denounce anything. It was part and parcel to what they were. They weren't that subtle with it. A critical difference here is that here in the United States, 70% of the population, a record high as of yesterday, supports gay marriage. The vast majority of Americans are not only not on board with Nazi flags being flown around, they are ideologically disgusted by it, including a lot of people on the right. I think the right is going to keep having these optics issues where more and more and more they are unable to deal with the ramifications and consequences of producing people who are on their side, but they can't, like, openly be seen agreeing with. So it's a really bad sign if DeSantis doesn't denounce this. No. DeSantis will almost certainly not denounce this. What I'm saying is it's a really bad sign for the GOP that he has to ignore it. The fact that he can neither denounce nor accept what the Nazis are doing in his name reveals an optical weakness on his part. He can't piss off his base by attacking Nazis, but he also can't, endure nationwide alienation by endorsing Nazis. That's too far gone. He's on a minefield, He's tiptoeing across it. It's weakness. It looks bad. He'll try. I'm just saying the fact that the right can't contend with the consequences of its most aggressive... Here, let me put it this way. Okay, I'm going to put it this way. This is how big the difference is, and you can think about this, okay? Joe Biden defended Antifa in his debates with Donald Trump back in 2020. After the BLM protests, the right screaming about Antifa, Joe Biden says in a debate that it's an idea, it's an ideology, it's not an organization. There's not some nefarious group of Antifa militia group, that's true, There isn't some central org. Joe Biden isn't a leftist. He, by name, defended Antifa, who are considered to be the extreme radical wing of the left in the United States. Doesn't that tell you a bit of a difference in how much of an optics nightmare our guys versus their guys are? Our optics nightmares, and to be clear, I've had issues with the optics of Antifa in the past. I've actually been critical of their tactics in a way that I think is constructive and well-informed, but some people disagree. That's fine. That's tangential to this. But the optics on Antifa, our guys, the far left, is good enough that a liberal president like Joe Biden can openly defend us. Whereas the extreme far right, which is a product of the Republican Party, is so optically damaging that Ron DeSantis, an open fascist, can neither denounce nor support them and has to just sweat his way around not acknowledging them. Do you see how big of a difference that is? That's what I mean. The Overton window has stretched a long way, but it has not gotten to a point where these two are equivocable. Vosh, that's not Biden defending Antifa, that's just recognizing reality. No, trust me. For a liberal moderate like Joe Biden to go up there on stage and say that Antifa is not an organization, it's an idea, that is a big deal. And that's indicative of the gulf here, the divide, you know? I mean, it would have been so easy for Joe Biden to have said, you know, no, I don't agree with those Antifa people, you know, I don't support with He could have said that so easily. He could have effortlessly, and I would have been upset if he had done that, but I wouldn't have been surprised. That would have been so likely. That's what I expected him to do, you know? Vosh, Trump defended the Proud Boys, to be fair, stand back and stand by, but he couldn't fully defend them. All he can say when talking about the Proud Boys, or all he said really was, I know these guys like me. I don't know very much about them, playing it down. I know they like me very much, trying not to lose their support. That's what he can say. He's not really defending them so much as he is enabling, which I'm not saying is good. I'm only saying he can't go and start, like, citing their tenets. And even the Proud Boys know that they're an optics nightmare. Gavin McInnes, a Nazi, stepped down and they put Enrique Tarrio, an FBI op, and a brown man to lead the organization as a way of deflecting from accusations of white supremacy. Meanwhile, Proud Boys keep having schisms within the movement as the Nazi contingents try to break off and form more Nazi versions of the Proud Boys. This is what I mean. Their side is more optically destructive to their side because they're worse people, you know? Like, at the end of the day, this is the consequence of being a fascist. You have to be a bad person to be a fascist. It's actually really simple. And being a bad person just makes people like you less. It just makes you open to these kinds of problems. Whereas far left people are by no means necessarily bad people. I mean, of course, there are bad people anywhere in the spectrum politically. So I've met plenty of far left people who I think are just giant assholes, but they're not fascists. You know, it's a big difference. I mean, many of them are, though. If they were, they wouldn't be leftists. You know, I'm not talking about tankies or like Jimmy Dore types. I'm talking about actual leftists. Please remember that just because like there's a loud, you know, contingent of grifters and Marxist, Leninist, Stalinist types online does not mean that broadly out in the real world, when you talk to people on the left, they're going to start defending Putin to you. That is very much more an online thing. Here's a mirror of the Desantis thing. Thank you, Alice.
He lived in his office like I lived in my office, and together we would take a shower in the basement, and we had a daily meeting when we took showers in the basement. Am I allowed to say that? He lived in his office like I lived in my office, and together we would take a shower in the basement, and we had a daily meeting when we took showers in the basement. Am I allowed to say that?
Wasn't Desantis a Navy man? This makes sense. He was, right? He was in the Navy. It makes sense. It's all fitting together. They're all repressors. Joined the U.S. Navy in 2004 and promoted to lieutenant before serving as a legal advisor to SEAL Team 1. He was stationed at Joint Task Force Guantanamo, deployed in Iraq. Yep. He was a Navy judiciary guy. Yeah. This looks like a Destroy All Humans cutscene. It really does, doesn't it? Yeah, that's kind of true. It does look like one. That's funny.